The wind howled across the alien forest, carrying the smell of rain and the roar of the swollen river. Ethan pushed through the thick undergrowth, his boots sinking in the wet earth, each step splashing muddy water. The storm had been raging for hours, and most travelers had found shelter. But Ethan had been caught far from any safe place. He was cold, soaked, and thinking only about finding somewhere dry to wait out the night. Then he heard it, a faint cry, thin and desperate, almost lost in the sound of rushing water. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then it came again, sharper, more urgent. He turned toward the sound, pushing branches aside, and found himself standing on the bank of the raging river. Through the sheets of rain, he saw something small caught in the current. It was a figure, tiny, fragile, fighting against the water. Her arms flailed weakly, her head barely staying above the surface. Without thinking, Ethan dropped his pack and ran. He leaped into the freezing water, the current slamming into him with the force of a wild beast. The cold bit into his muscles, making every movement heavy, but he pushed forward. His eyes stayed locked on the small figure. Now drifting closer to the jagged rocks, he reached her. Just as her head slipped under the water, grabbing her arm, he pulled with all his strength. Fighting both the current and the weight of her soaked clothes, her skin felt strange under his hand, smooth, almost glowing in the dim light, and her hair floated like silver threads. She coughed weakly as he dragged her toward the shore. The river tried to pull them both back, but Ethan's boots found the muddy bank, and he hauled her out onto the grass. She collapsed in his arms, her small body trembling violently from the cold. Her eyes, large and luminous, fluttered open. Looking at him with fear and confusion, she whispered something in a language he didn't understand, the words soft and trembling. "It's all right," Ethan said, though he had no idea if she could understand. "You're safe now." She shivered, curling closer to him as if afraid the river might reach out and take her back. Up close, he saw she wasn't human. Her skin was pale, with a faint blue glow under it, like moonlight. Trapped beneath the surface, her ears were small and pointed, and delicate patterns traced her cheeks, not paint, but markings that seemed a part of her. She was light in his arms, almost weightless. Ethan took off his jacket and wrapped it around her. Feeling the thinness of her frame, she looked young, maybe no older than a child, though he couldn't tell. With alien features, when he tried to set her down, she grabbed his shirt with surprising strength. Her voice trembled as she spoke again, this time with words he understood. "Please, don't let them take me." Ethan froze. "Who?" he asked quietly, glancing around the dark forest, but she only shook her head. Her grip tightening, the wind shifted, carrying faint sounds. Voices, distant but growing closer. They weren't human voices. The sounds were guttural, deep, and filled with intent. The girl's eyes widened in panic, and she tried to make herself smaller against him. He didn't know who was coming, but he knew they weren't here to help. "We have to move," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. He lifted her again, cradling her close, and began moving through the trees. The rain made the ground slippery, roots grabbing at his boots, but he kept going. Every few steps he looked over his shoulder. Shadows moved between the trees, tall shapes with glowing eyes scanning the ground. The girl buried her face against his chest, her small hands gripping him like he was her last anchor. Lightning flashed, revealing 3 figures on the far bank of the river. They wore dark armor, the plates glinting in the stormlight, and each carried a long staff with a glowing tip. Even from this distance, Ethan could feel the menace rolling off them. They were searching for her. He ducked under low branches, keeping to the darker parts of the forest. His breath came in short bursts, his heart pounding against his ribs. The girl's breathing was shallow, her body still trembling from the cold. Finally, he found a cluster of fallen trees forming a natural shelter. He crouched behind it, holding her close, listening to the rain and the distant voices. The hunters moved slowly, methodically, as if they knew she couldn't have gone far. One of them stopped, lifting his head, and turned directly toward their hiding place. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The girl squeezed her eyes shut, pressing herself tighter against him. The glowing tip of the hunter's staff lit up the wet ground as he began to walk toward them. Ethan tightened his hold on her, his mind racing. He didn't know what these creatures wanted, but he knew one thing. He had promised not to leave. Her and he would keep that promise, no matter what came out of the shadows next. The rain had not slowed, and the forest was alive with sound. Water dripped from every branch. The river roared behind them. And somewhere among the trees, heavy footsteps moved with purpose. Ethan held the girl close as he slipped away from the fallen logs. He could feel her heart beat against his chest, fast, uneven, terrified. The glow from the strange marks on her skin was faint, but still visible in the dark. And he realized with a sinking feeling that it could give them away. Cover it. He whispered, tugging at the edges of his jacket around her. She nodded quickly, pulling the fabric tighter, though the glow still bled faintly through the wet cloth. The voices were closer now, the alien tones sharp and harsh, like commands. They didn't sound like they were searching blindly. They sounded like they were tracking. Ethan moved quickly but carefully, weaving through roots and low branches. Avoiding open ground, the girl kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting to see a shadow step out from the rain at any moment. "What's your name?" he asked softly, needing to keep her focused. She hesitated before answering. "Leora," her voice trembled, but there was a strange strength in the way she said it. "They'll take me back if they find me," she whispered, "and you too." Because you touched me, Ethan didn't understand what she meant. But now wasn't the time for questions. He just nodded, not going to happen. The forest thinned for a moment, revealing a wide, muddy slope leading down toward another stretch of river, but before Ethan could decide whether to go that way, a flash of movement in the corner of his eye made him stop. Through the rain, he saw one of the hunters, a tall figure in black armor moving across the slope. Scanning with a strange device, Ethan ducked back into the trees, pulling Leora down with him. They crouched in the mud, holding their breath. The hunter's device emitted a faint pulse of light, sweeping over the area when it passed near their hiding place. Leora flinched and clung tighter to Ethan's shirt. "They can feel the runes," she whispered, barely moving her lips. Ethan looked at her sharply. "The what?" She didn't answer, only shook her head with urgency. The pulse of light stopped suddenly. The hunter turned his helmet toward them. Ethan's stomach tightened. They had been found. The hunter moved with slow, deliberate steps toward their hiding place. Ethan's mind raced. Running now would mean being chased in the open. But staying meant capture. The hunter's weapon hummed faintly, its glowing tip casting eerie light on the rain-soaked leaves. Leora's breathing grew quicker, and her eyes filled with dread. Ethan reached down and grabbed a thick branch lying beside him. It was heavy and slick, but it was all he had. The hunter stepped closer. Ethan waited until he was almost within reach, then suddenly pushed to his feet. He swung the branch hard, striking the hunter's weapon and knocking it aside. "Run!" Ethan shouted, pulling Leora with him. They tore through the undergrowth, branches whipping at their faces. Behind them, a roar of anger cut through the rain, followed by more voices. The forest seemed to come alive with pursuit, multiple hunters crashing after them. Ethan's lungs burned, but he didn't stop. They scrambled over roots and rocks, splashing through shallow streams. Every time Ethan risked a glance back, the hunters were still there, relentless. The ground dipped suddenly, and they slid down a muddy slope. At the bottom, Ethan spotted a dark opening in the rock, a cave mouth hidden by ferns. "This way," he said, dragging Leora toward it. The cave was narrow at first, forcing them to squeeze through, but it opened into a wider space inside. Ethan pulled her deeper, his ears straining for the sound of their pursuers inside. It was cold and pitch black except for the faint glow from Leora's markings. She sank to her knees, gasping for breath. "They'll keep searching," she said quietly. "They won't stop until they have me." Ethan knelt beside her. Then, "We stay ahead of them." But even as he said it, he knew the hunters were skilled. Hiding in one place for too long was dangerous. Then, from the cave entrance, came the crunch of boots on wet stone. A shadow appeared against the faint light. From outside, tall and broad-shouldered, a deep, steady voice spoke in perfect English, human. Hand over the girl. Leora froze, her hand clutching Ethan's arm. The voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the threat in it. Ethan rose slowly, his mind torn between talking and fighting. The figure stepped closer, revealing black armor and a helmet with a narrow visor that glowed faintly red. "You have no idea what you've taken," the hunter said, "but you will give her back." Ethan glanced down at Leora, saw the fear in her eyes, and shook his head. "No," he said simply. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rain outside. Then the hunter's weapon hummed to life, casting a deadly glow across the cave walls. Ethan tightened his grip on the branch still in his hand. Whatever happened next, he wasn't letting her go. The air in the cave was cold and damp. Every breath Ethan took felt heavy. The hunter's glowing weapon lit the stone walls with a faint, pulsing light, shadows stretching like claws. Leora's small hand clung to Ethan's shirt, her fingers trembling. The rain outside had softened into a steady drizzle, but the danger inside had only grown. "You have one chance," the hunter said, his voice echoing off the stone. "Give her to me and walk away alive." Ethan didn't move, his grip on the branch tightening until his knuckles ached. "She's not yours," he said, his voice low. The hunter tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "Then she's yours." "She's under my protection," Ethan answered. The red visor studied him for a long moment before the hunter stepped forward. The hum of the weapon rising, Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. He knew he couldn't win in a straight fight. Not against armor and alien weapons. His only chance was to outthink him. Behind the hunter, faint voices echoed from outside. More of them were coming. They were running out of time. Ethan took one slow step back, then another, pulling Leora with him deeper into the cave. The hunter followed, confident. Ethan's eyes darted around the shadows, searching for anything, an escape, a weapon, a trick. Then he saw it, a narrow fissure in the rock wall, just wide enough for a small person to slip through. He crouched slightly, whispering into Leora's ear, "Go through there, as fast as you can." Her eyes widened. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," he promised. She hesitated. But when the hunter stepped closer, she darted toward the crack in the wall, disappearing into the darkness beyond. The hunter moved to follow, but Ethan swung the branch with all his strength, striking the glowing weapon and knocking it against the wall. Sparks burst in the dim light. Ethan dropped the branch and shoved the hunter hard, forcing him to stumble. Then he turned and squeezed himself into the fissure after Leora. The rough stones scraping his shoulders, it was pitch black inside. The sound of dripping water echoing somewhere ahead. Ethan could hear Leora's quick breaths just a few feet away. Behind them, the hunter's voice roared in an alien language, followed by the heavy thud of boots as he tried to follow. The crack twisted and narrowed, forcing Ethan to crawl on his hands and knees. Finally, the passage opened into a larger chamber, dimly lit by glowing moss clinging to the walls. Leora stood in the center, shivering but watching him with wide eyes. "You came," she whispered, as if she hadn't been sure he would. "I told you I wouldn't leave," Ethan replied, his own breath ragged. She lowered her gaze. Then, sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest for a moment. The only sound was water dripping somewhere far off. Ethan crouched in front of her. "Who are they?" he asked gently. "They're collectors," she said softly. "They take people like me. Sell us to the highest bidder." Her voice broke slightly. "No one ever comes back." Ethan's jaw tightened. Not this time. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. "The marks. The glow you saw. It's because of you," he frowned. "Because of me?" She nodded slowly. "When you pulled me from the water, you saved my life, in a way my people see as sacred." Her small hand touched the markings on her arm, the light within them pulsing faintly. "It means you're bound to me now. They can track the glow, and they won't stop until we're both caught." Ethan stared at the faint blue light, realizing that her survival had linked them in ways he didn't understand. Before he could respond, a distant metallic clang echoed. Through the fissure they'd crawled through, Leora's head snapped up, fear flashing in her eyes. "They found the way in," she whispered. Ethan's mind raced. The chamber had several other tunnels branching off into darkness, but choosing the wrong one could lead them straight into another trap. "Which way?" he asked. Leora stood, glancing quickly between the tunnels. "There's a deeper path," she said, pointing to one where the moss glowed faintly green. "It leads to the heart caves. But it's dangerous." Ethan gave a small nod. "Dangerous is fine. As long as it's away from them." The sound of boots was louder now, echoing off the cave walls. Ethan grabbed her hand. Pulling her toward the tunnel, the air grew colder as they moved. The walls slick with moisture. At one point, the tunnel dropped steeply, forcing them to slide down a slope of wet stone. They landed in another chamber, this one larger, with an underground pool reflecting the glow of the moss. Leora looked at the water nervously. "We have to cross. The other side connects to a hidden exit." Ethan stepped forward, testing the edge with his boot. The water was dark, up, the bottom invisible. Before they could move, a deep voice echoed from behind. "Run all you like, human. The bond makes you easy to find." Ethan turned toward the sound, his grip on Leora tightening. The hunter's silhouette appeared in the tunnel they'd just left, weapon glowing, visor burning red in the gloom. Ethan stepped in front of Leora, the cold water lapping at his boots. There was no more hiding, no more running for now. If they wanted to escape, they would have to fight their way out. The glow from the hunter's weapon painted the cave walls in red and gold. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, the sound echoing like slow, heavy footsteps. Ethan stood between Leora and the hunter, his body tense, his boots half submerged. In the cold pool, the hunter's visor burned with an unblinking red light, locking onto Ethan like a predator sizing up its prey. "You've run far enough," the hunter said, in that deep, steady voice. "Hand her over and you may still leave here breathing." Ethan shook his head slowly. "Not going to happen." The hunter tilted his head slightly. "You know what she is, what she's worth." "I don't care," Ethan replied, his voice sharp. "She's not property." The hunter chuckled, the sound low and humorless. "You think this is about ownership, human?" he said. "She carries a bond mark. And that mark links to you now." Ethan didn't move. So, the hunter continued, stepping closer, "you are part of the price." Leora gasped softly, gripping Ethan's sleeve. "They'll take you too," she whispered. "Sell you alongside me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Not going to happen." He repeated. The hunter stopped at the edge of the pool, his weapon lowering slightly. "I'm offering you a bargain," he said, his tone shifting. "Give her to me, and I'll erase your mark. You walk away free, no one will hunt you." Ethan looked down at Leora. Her wide eyes searched his face, full of fear, but also something else, a desperate hope that he wouldn't let her go. She didn't speak, but her grip on his sleeve tightened. Until her knuckles turned pale, the silence stretched, the hunter watching them both. "You have no idea how many would take this offer," the hunter added. "Most would throw her at my feet to save their own life." Ethan's voice was steady. When he finally spoke, "I'm not most people." The hunter's visor tilted slightly, almost like a nod. "Then you've made your choice." The hum of the weapon rose again, the red glow deepening. The water rippled as the hunter stepped in, sending cold waves against Ethan's legs. Ethan glanced at the chamber walls, searching. For an advantage, the ceiling arched high above, jagged with sharp stone. And the far side of the pool disappeared into darkness. Maybe a tunnel, maybe a trap. He had no time to decide. The hunter lunged forward. Swinging the glowing weapon in a fast, brutal arc, Ethan pulled Leora back just in time. The blade of light slicing through the water where they had stood, sending up a hiss of steam. Leora clutched Ethan's arm, her voice urgent. "The tunnel." She pointed toward the shadowed side of the chamber. The hunter saw the movement and moved to cut them off. Ethan shoved Leora ahead. "Go." She splashed through the water toward the dark opening. Ethan turned to block the hunter, grabbing a loose rock from the pool's edge and hurling it with all his strength. The rock struck the side of the hunter's helmet, making him stagger for half a second, just enough time for Ethan to retreat toward the tunnel. They scrambled into the narrow passage, the sound of the hunter's boots pounding after them. The walls were slick and uneven, the air colder here. Leora's breathing was fast, but she didn't slow. "They won't give up," she whispered. "You know that, right?" Ethan nodded. "Then we make them regret chasing us." The tunnel opened suddenly into a smaller cavern lit by faint green moss. Leora stopped, pointing toward a cluster of strange crystals growing from the far wall. "They react to sound," she said quickly. "Loud enough, and they shatter. The shards are sharp, deadly." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "So we make noise." The hunter's shadow appeared in the tunnel behind them, his weapon raised. Ethan grabbed one of the loose stones scattered across the floor and slammed it against the crystals. A high ringing sound filled the chamber. The crystals began to tremble, the light inside them flickering. The hunter stepped forward cautiously, visor scanning the room. Ethan hit the crystals again, harder this time, with a sudden piercing crack. Several of them exploded, shards flying through the air like glass knives. The hunter's armor deflected most of them, but one shard sliced across his arm, making him jerk back. "You dare," he growled. Ethan didn't answer, just grabbed Leora's hand and ran for another tunnel on the opposite side. The hunter shouted something in his own language, his voice echoing through the stone. But Ethan and Leora were already gone. There, footsteps fading into the dark. The tunnel was long and winding, and every step felt heavier. Leora looked over her shoulder, her voice soft but certain. "He won't stop until one of us is dead." Ethan glanced down at her, his jaw set. Then, "We make sure it's not us." Ahead, the tunnel began to slope upward, the air growing warmer. They could hear the faint sound of wind, an exit. But between them and that sound lay whatever dangers the heart caves still held. Ethan didn't know what waited for them, but he knew the hunter would be right behind, and the next encounter would be even worse. The tunnel narrowed as they climbed, the sound of the wind growing louder ahead. Leora's small hand stayed in Ethan's, her fingers cold but steady every few steps. She glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting the red glow of the hunters' visor to appear at any moment. The air here was warmer than the caves below, carrying a faint, sweet scent that didn't belong in such a dark place. Ethan slowed when the tunnel curved sharply and opened into a hidden chamber. It was unlike anything he had seen so far. Smooth stone walls glistened as if polished by centuries of water. The ceiling sparkled faintly, as if tiny stars were trapped inside the rock. In the center of the room stood a wide, shallow pool, glowing with soft blue light. Leora stopped at the edge, staring at her reflection. "This is a bond pool," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "A what?" She knelt, trailing her fingers in the water. "It's where my people bring those who have been marked." The glow from her skin seemed brighter here. As if the pool recognized her, Ethan crouched beside her. "You keep talking about this. Mark, what exactly does it mean?" Leora's gaze lifted to his, her voice quiet but steady. "When you saved me from the river, the water touched both our blood. My people's magic saw it as a binding act." She touched the markings on her arm, the soft blue light pulsing under her skin. "It connected us." For life, Ethan's brows drew together. "Connected how?" "You feel it already, don't you?" she asked softly. "The need to keep me safe." "The way my fear feels like yours?" Ethan opened his mouth to deny it. But the truth was, there, from the moment he'd seen her in the water, it was as if some invisible thread tied them together. He couldn't explain why he was willing to risk everything for her, but it was more than just choice now. "It's not just feelings," Leora continued. "The bond makes our lives tied. If one of us dies, the other will too." Ethan stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "That's why they want you so badly," she added. "Not just for me, but for you now too. A bonded pair can be sold for a fortune." Her voice shook, and once sold, there is no escape. Ethan sat back, running a hand over his face. The truth hit him harder than the cold river ever had. Protecting her wasn't just about her survival anymore. It was about both of them. But that didn't change his choice. "We're getting out," he said firmly. "Both of us." Leora looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small nod, a flicker of trust in her eyes. She stood, glancing toward another tunnel leading upward. "That way will take us to the cliff paths. But they'll be watching them. Then we'll make them think we went another way." Ethan said, his mind already working. He searched the chamber and found a narrow crack in the wall, barely visible behind the pool. "If we leave signs here like we rested, they might waste time searching for us in the wrong direction." Leora followed his lead, leaving small marks near the pool, scattering a few wet footprints toward the wrong tunnel. When they were done, they slipped through the hidden crack. The stone cool and rough against their shoulders, the passage was tight and dark. But after a short climb, it opened into a ledge overlooking a vast cavern below. From here, they could see movement, faint red and gold lights weaving through the lower caves. The hunters were close, far too close. Ethan crouched low, watching them move, their spreading out. He whispered. Leora nodded, her voice just as quiet. "They're hunting by the bond glow. Even faint traces lead them." He looked at her. "Can you hide it?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not for long. It's like trying to hide your heartbeat below." One of the hunters stopped, turning its helmet toward their ledge. Ethan's chest tightened. "We need to move now." They crawled along the ledge, careful not to send rocks falling into the cavern. The path curved around and then sloped upward toward a shaft of pale light. An exit, but the sound of boots was already behind them. Closer than before, they broke into a run, the light growing brighter. Leora stumbled once, but Ethan caught her without slowing. The tunnel narrowed again, forcing them to squeeze through a jagged gap. Finally, they burst into the open air, a cliffside path overlooking a stormy alien sea. The wind whipped at their clothes, the waves crashing far below. For a moment, Ethan thought they had made it. Then a voice came from behind, deep and cold. "You can't run from a bond." Human, Ethan spun around. And there he was, the lead hunter, visor glowing, weapon raised. The wind howled between them, the sea roaring far below. Leora stepped closer to Ethan, her eyes fierce despite her fear. "You'll have to kill us both," she said, her voice steady. The hunter tilted his head. That was always the plan. Ethan shifted his stance, feeling the drop of the cliff at his back. There was no more running. The bond wasn't just a tie, it was a reason to fight harder than ever, and he wasn't about to let it break. The wind tore at Ethan's clothes, pulling at his balance behind him. The cliff dropped into a raging alien sea, waves smashing against jagged black rocks far below. Before him stood the lead hunter. Visor glowing red, weapon humming with deadly power, and somewhere in the shadows of the cliff path, Ethan knew more hunters were closing in. Leora stood close at his side, her small hand gripping the back of his shirt. Her eyes were fixed on the hunter, her body trembling, but her voice steady. "They won't stop. Unless you make them." Ethan didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. He knew she was right. Running had only delayed the inevitable. Now there was nowhere left to run. The hunter stepped forward, boots scraping against the rock. "You've cost us time, human." His voice was like stone grinding together. "That ends here." Ethan took a slow breath. Forcing the fear down, he scanned the path, narrow, uneven, with loose stones scattered near the edge. A wrong step could mean falling to his death. But maybe that could work in his favor. The hunter raised his weapon, the glow brightening. Ethan shoved Leora behind a jagged outcrop of stone. "Stay down no matter what." She started to protest, but he was already moving. The first strike came fast. A horizontal slash of the glowing blade. Ethan ducked under it, feeling the heat as it cut the air above his head. He grabbed a loose rock from the ground and hurled it, striking the hunter's helmet with a sharp crack. The impact made him stagger back a step, but not for long. Another strike came, this one vertical, aimed to split him in two. Ethan leaped aside, the blade slamming into the stone and sending shards flying. The hunter was strong, but his movements were heavy. Ethan realized if he stayed fast, kept him off balance, he might have a chance. From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw movement down the path, two more hunters appearing, weapons ready. His stomach sank. But he didn't let it show. The lead hunter moved in again, swinging for his chest. Ethan sidestepped, grabbed the shaft of the weapon with both hands, and twisted hard. The hunter resisted, but the slick stone beneath his boots gave way. For a moment, he wobbled near the edge of the cliff. Ethan shoved with all his strength. The hunter dropped to one knee, catching himself just in time. The two others were almost on them now. Ethan had seconds, maybe less. "Leora," he called. "Now." From her hiding place, Leora sprang out, holding a fist-sized chunk of rock. She threw it with surprising accuracy, hitting the side of the lead hunter's weapon. The blow disrupted its hum, the glow flickering for a heartbeat. Ethan seized the moment, ramming his shoulder into the hunter's chest. The force sent both of them sliding dangerously close to the cliff edge. The hunter roared and shoved back, but Ethan twisted. Using the momentum to hook his foot behind the alien's leg, they went down hard. The hunter crashing onto his back with Ethan on top. Ethan wrenched the weapon free, tossing it over the cliff. Into the sea below, the hunter grabbed at him, but Ethan rolled away just in time. The two other hunters charged forward, weapons raised. Ethan scooped up another rock and hurled it. Striking one in the visor, the blow slowed him. But the other kept coming. Leora darted behind Ethan, her hands glowing faintly with the light of the bond. She placed her palm on the ground, and the glow spread into the stone, a pulse of energy that made the cliff tremble. Cracks split the path between them and the approaching hunters. One of the hunters tried to leap the gap, but the crumbling rock gave way beneath him. He fell, his weapon clattering against the cliff as he vanished into the sea. The remaining two hunters regrouped, but Ethan could see hesitation now. The lead hunter's visor flickered faintly, his weapon gone. "You can't keep this up forever," he growled. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. long enough to make sure you regret trying." The hunters exchanged a glance, then began to back away down the path. Ethan didn't relax until their shapes faded into the mist. Only then did he turn to Leora, who was leaning heavily against the rock, breathing hard. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, though her face was pale. "They'll be back," she said softly. "They never give up on a marked one." Ethan looked out over the restless sea, the wind cold against his face. "Then we'll be ready for them," he said. The bond between them pulsed faintly, a shared rhythm that neither could ignore. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about standing together, no matter how many times the hunters came. The mist along the cliff thinned as the wind shifted, revealing the jagged coastline far below. The roar of the sea was endless. Waves smashing against the black rocks with bone-breaking force. Ethan stood at the edge of the narrow path, his chest rising and falling with each breath. Beside him, Leora's small figure trembled, but her gaze was fixed ahead. They both knew it wasn't over. The sound came first, the low hum of alien weapons charging. Then the shapes emerged from the fog, for hunters this time, their visors glowing in unison. The lead hunter was back, armor scratched from the last fight, but his stance steady and confident. "You made this harder than it needed to be, human," he said, voice like iron. "It ends now." Ethan glanced at Leora. Her hand slipped into his, the faint glow of the bond marks spreading between them. "No running?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No running." The hunters fanned out along the path, their weapons crackling with light. Ethan could feel the heat coming off them even from a distance. One wrong move and they'd both be finished. But he also felt something else, the steady pulse of the bond. As if Leora's heartbeat and his own had merged, it gave him focus, a strange calm in the face of danger. The lead hunter stepped forward, his weapon aimed at Ethan's chest. "This is your last chance. Hand her over." Ethan's answer was simple. "No." The hunter's visor flared brighter. "Then you die with her." The first strike came fast, a sweeping slash meant to cut them both down. Ethan yanked Leora aside, the blade of light carving through the rock where they had stood. Shards exploded outward, some cutting shallow lines into his arm, but he didn't slow. They moved together down the path, keeping just ahead of the strikes. Leora's free hand pressed to the rock wall, sending soft pulses of light into the stone. The hunters closed in from both sides. Leora's glow spread into the cracks of the cliff, and the ground trembled. Loose stones rolled toward the edge. One hunter stumbled, his footing lost. Ethan seized the chance, lunging forward and slamming his shoulder into the alien's chest. The hunter toppled backward, disappearing into the sea below, his weapon following with a splash. But the others didn't slow. The lead hunter roared, swinging his weapon in a brutal overhead strike. Ethan blocked with a length of driftwood he had grabbed earlier, the impact splintering it in two. Leora's glow intensified, and a deep crack tore through the cliff path. The second hunter tried to leap it, but the crumbling rock gave way, and he vanished into the mist. Now there were only two left, the lead and one more. The second charged at Leora, forcing Ethan to choose, defend her, or finish the leader. He chose her, slamming into the attacker and wrestling him toward the cliff's edge. The alien fought back hard, their feet skidding on loose rock. A final shove sent him over, his roar swallowed by the wind. Ethan turned and froze. The lead hunter had Leora, his armored arm locked around her waist, weapon at her throat. "Drop whatever courage you think you have, human," the hunter growled, "or I end her here." Ethan's chest tightened. He stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "You kill her, you kill me too. You know that." The hunter's visor tilted. "Then we all fall." Leora's eyes met Ethan's. "No fear now. Only trust." She whispered something so quietly he almost didn't hear. "Push." Ethan lunged forward. The hunter reacted too late. Ethan slammed into both of them, the three of them crashing toward the edge. At the last instant, Leora twisted free, grabbing Ethan's arm as the hunter tumbled into the roaring sea, his red visor vanishing beneath. The waves, they collapsed on the wet stone, both gasping for breath for a long moment. The only sound was the wind and the distant thunder of water. Ethan turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded, her small hand still gripping his arm tightly. "You didn't let go." She said softly, "I never will." He replied. They stood together, the storm clouds breaking just enough to let pale light spill over the sea. The bond between them pulsed faintly, steady and unbroken. The hunters would send more. They both knew it. But they also knew something else. They would face them together. Ethan glanced at the endless horizon, his voice quiet but sure. "As long as I'm breathing, Leora, you'll never be alone," and with the wind at their backs, they began the long walk along the cliff, two lives bound by fate, moving forward into whatever came next, never letting go.